There are moments in history when we encounter pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, can challenge everything we thought we knew. One such puzzle involves the mysterious bloodline of the Merovingians. What if the true heirs to Europe's ancient thrones are not the families we recognize today, but a shadowy dynasty whose story has been deliberately obscured? For centuries, the history books have told us that the Merovingian kings were overthrown, erased from power, and relegated to the dusty corners of medieval Europe. But what if the Merovingian bloodline never truly died out? What if, instead, it has been hiding in plain sight, its legacy quietly influencing the course of world history? This is not the history we were taught in school. We were told that after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Merovingians, often referred to as the long-haired kings, ruled the Franks with a sense of divine right, but their power was eventually stripped away by the Carolingians. The rise of Charlemagne marked the end of their dynasty, or so the official narrative goes. But beneath this familiar tale lies a far deeper and more intriguing story, a tale of secrets, hidden connections, and a bloodline that, despite its apparent demise, continues to captivate the imagination of historians, conspiracy theorists, and seekers of lost knowledge. The history of the Merovingians is shrouded in mystery. Little is known about their origins, and even less about their eventual disappearance. The Merovingians were known for their long, flowing hair, which was believed to symbolize their divine right to rule. This seemingly simple detail has sparked a range of theories suggesting that the Merovingians were not just kings, but a royal family with a far more complex and significant role in history. Some believe that their bloodline was not only sacred, but possibly tied to the Holy Grail itself, a secret kept hidden by the Church for reasons that remain unclear. The Merovingians, according to these theories, were protectors of a secret lineage, one that could challenge the very foundations of Christianity and the Church's power. But what happened to them? The official history states that the Merovingians were overthrown by the Carolingians in the 8th century. Their reign ended by a coup led by Pepin the Short, the father of Charlemagne. After this dramatic change in leadership, the Merovingians faded from the annals of history. But many of their royal bloodline allegedly continued to exist in the shadows, their influence hidden from view, their legacy systematically erased. This documentary will explore the hidden legacy of the Merovingian dynasty, an ancient family whose bloodline may have never truly disappeared, but rather been deliberately concealed, its story twisted and obscured by those in power. Could the Church, with its vast influence over medieval Europe, have played a role in suppressing the history of the Merovingians to protect its own interests? Did they try to erase the Merovingians to consolidate their authority and prevent a rival royal lineage from challenging their dominance? The idea that the Merovingian bloodline was not fully extinguished raises questions that reach beyond history into the realm of legend, prophecy, and conspiracy. Could the bloodline have survived in secret, influencing world events from behind the scenes? Was the Church's suppression of the Merovingians a deliberate attempt to bury the truth? And if the bloodline did survive, what evidence might be hidden in the artifacts, symbols, and texts scattered across Europe? As we journey through this forgotten history, we will examine the clues that point to a story far more complex than the official accounts ever dared to reveal. The connection between the Merovingians and the Holy Grail is one of the most enduring and tantalizing aspects of their legacy. The Grail is often seen as a symbol of divine power, a relic imbued with sacred significance. Could it be that the Merovingian kings, whose reigns were steeped in mystery, were the true guardians of this sacred object? And if so, how did the Church, whose authority was built on its claim to religious supremacy, feel about a royal bloodline that might possess the Grail, or at least have a claim to it? This question has haunted historians and mystics alike, fueling the belief that the Merovingians were not merely kings, but something much more profound, keepers of secrets that could shake the very foundations of religious and political power. As we begin to peel back the layers of this enigmatic past, it becomes clear that the history of the Merovingians is far from straightforward. There is evidence suggesting that the church's treatment of the Merovingians was far from neutral. Was their downfall the result of political maneuvering, or was it part of a larger effort to rewrite history and suppress certain truths? As we investigate further, we will uncover the details of the Merovingian dynasty's abrupt downfall, the role the church played in it, and how this powerful bloodline might have continued to influence European politics and culture long after the official collapse of their rule. In this journey, we will follow the trail of clues left behind by those who sought to protect the secrets of the Merovingians, whether through hidden symbols in art and architecture, ancient texts, or mysterious prophecies that seem to predict the return of this lost bloodline. We will also explore the theories that link the Merovingians to modern-day royal families, secret societies like the Freemasons, and even the Knights Templar, a group whose own history is steeped in mystery and intrigue. But perhaps the most striking question of all is this: why does this story matter today? What significance does the Merovingian bloodline hold for modern society? And why has it captivated the imaginations of people for centuries? The answer may lie in the way power is wielded and concealed throughout history, how elites have worked to control narratives and suppress knowledge that could threaten their position. In exploring the Merovingian legacy, we are not just uncovering the past. We are confronting the hidden forces that continue to shape our world today. As we move deeper into this investigation, remember that history is rarely as simple as it seems. The story of the Merovingians is not just one of lost kings and forgotten dynasties. It is a story of power, secrets, and the lengths to which those in power will go to protect their dominance. The church may have succeeded in erasing the Merovingians from public memory, but their bloodline, like the myths and legends surrounding it, refuses to die. The question is, how long can the truth remain hidden, and what happens when it is finally revealed? The story of the Merovingian dynasty is as enigmatic as it is fascinating. To most, they were little more than a footnote in the history of Europe, their reign over the Franks ending abruptly in the 8th century, overshadowed by the rise of the Carolingians. Yet, when we look closer at the Merovingians, we begin to unravel a tale far more complex than what traditional history would suggest. Were the Merovingians truly kings, or were they something more? Were they the rulers of a legitimate and powerful dynasty, or was their story simply a myth, a legend constructed to obscure deeper truths that have been long forgotten? At the heart of this mystery lies the question of their origin. The Merovingians were often referred to as the long-haired kings, a title that speaks volumes about their unique identity. While this may seem like a trivial detail, the long hair was not just a physical characteristic, it was a symbol. In Merovingian society, the long hair of the king was seen as a divine sign of power. It was believed that the king's hair held a sacred energy, one that connected him directly to the gods. This seemingly simple ritual was deeply embedded in the Merovingian worldview, emphasizing the divine right of the king to rule. However, this connection to the divine has been questioned by many historians who suggest that the long-haired kings might have been more symbolic than literal rulers. Some suggest that their reign was not built on real political power, but rather on the illusion of divinity and sacred kingship. The real power in Frankish society, they argue, may have actually rested with the aristocracy or the church, who used the Merovingian monarchs as figureheads to legitimize their own control. If this were true, then the Merovingians would not have been kings in the traditional sense. They would have been pawns in a much larger political game, their image carefully constructed and preserved to maintain an illusion of royal authority. But this theory runs into a problem. The Merovingians ruled for nearly 300 years, a period that saw them control vast territories and influence the course of European history. They were not mere figureheads. Their reign was marked by a strong and centralized monarchy, and they presided over the consolidation of the Frankish Empire. This was a time when the Frankish kingdom was a powerful force in Western Europe, with the Merovingians at its helm. The idea that such an influential dynasty was merely a creation of the church or the aristocracy is hard to accept. After all, no political entity can survive for centuries purely on the basis of myth. The Merovingians must have had real power, at least for a time. So, how do we reconcile these conflicting narratives? To answer this question, we need to delve deeper into the actual history of the Merovingians and the evidence that supports their role as true rulers. The Merovingian dynasty began with a man named Merovec, a king of the Franks in the 5th century. His reign, although shrouded in mystery, is often credited with laying the foundation for the dynasty. His son, Childeric I, would go on to rule a large portion of what is now modern-day France, and his own son, Clovis I, is widely regarded as the first true king of the Franks. Clovis's conversion to Christianity in 496 CE was a turning point in the history of the Merovingian dynasty. His baptism by Saint Remigius, a pivotal moment in the Christianization of the Frankish people, earned him the favor of the church. In turn, the church would become a powerful ally of the Merovingians, helping to solidify their rule and ensure the dynasty's survival for generations. For Clovis, the support of the church was essential in maintaining his authority. The Merovingians were not just political rulers, they were also deeply intertwined with religious power, and their legitimacy was rooted in the divine. But as time passed, the power of the Merovingians began to fade. By the 7th century, their influence was waning, and the real power in the kingdom was shifting to the mayors of the palace, who were responsible for running the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom. The last Merovingian king of note was Dagobert I, whose reign ended in 639 CE. After his death, the Merovingians effectively lost control over the Frankish kingdom. The mayors of the palace, most notably Charles Martel, began to assume more power, eventually leading to the Carolingian dynasty's rise and the eventual overthrow of the Merovingians. It was this transition from Merovingian to Carolingian rule that set the stage for many of the theories that surround the Merovingians today. The official history states that the Merovingians were simply replaced by the Carolingians due to their inability to effectively govern. However, many scholars and conspiracy theorists have suggested that there was more to the story. Some have speculated that the Merovingians were deliberately removed from power because they posed a threat to the growing influence of the church and other political elites. The idea that the church, which had allied itself so closely with the Merovingians, would turn on them and orchestrate their downfall is a tantalizing one, and it raises questions about the true nature of the Merovingians' power. One theory suggests that the church sought to erase the Merovingians not just because of their political power, but because of their supposed connection to a far more secretive and dangerous legacy, the bloodline of Jesus Christ himself. This theory, popularized by books like the Da Vinci Code, claims that the Merovingians were descendants of Christ, and that their royal lineage was part of a much larger and more ancient conspiracy. According to this theory, the church worked to suppress the Merovingians because their bloodline was seen as a rival to the church's claim to spiritual authority. This story, though often dismissed by mainstream historians, has captured the imagination of many, and it has led to a deeper investigation into the true origins of the Merovingian dynasty. Could the Merovingians have been more than just kings? Could they have been custodians of a secret that the church was desperate to keep hidden? The idea that the Merovingians were more than mere rulers is one that continues to intrigue historians, mystics, and conspiracy theorists alike. Whether or not their bloodline was connected to Jesus Christ or some other ancient power, one thing is clear: the Merovingians were not ordinary kings. They were part of a much larger, more mysterious story, a story that has been obscured, rewritten, and suppressed over the centuries. The Merovingians, in many ways, were both kings and myths, an extraordinary bloodline that has been lost to history, but whose legacy continues to shape the present in ways we are only beginning to understand. In the end, the question of whether the Merovingians were truly kings or just a myth depends on how we define power. Was their power political, or was it symbolic? Was it tied to their ability to rule and conquer, or to their perceived connection to something much greater? The answer may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps the Merovingians were both kings and myths, rulers who were seen as divine, but whose power was also carefully constructed and maintained by those who needed them. Whatever the answer may be, one thing is certain. The story of the Merovingians is far from over. The questions they raised and the legacy they left behind continue to captivate those who seek to uncover the hidden truths of our past. The Merovingian dynasty's decline and the subsequent rise of the Carolingians is one of the most pivotal moments in European history, yet it is shrouded in mystery and controversy. Officially, it is seen as a natural transition of power from one family to another, an orderly shift of leadership brought on by necessity. The Merovingians, with their increasingly weak and ineffective rule, were replaced by a more capable dynasty, the Carolingians, who would go on to shape Europe in profound ways. However, as we dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding the rise of the Carolingians, a far darker and more intriguing picture begins to emerge. Was the rise of the Carolingians really a simple political succession, or was it, as some have suggested, the result of a carefully orchestrated coup? The story begins with the Merovingians' slow and steady decline during the 7th century. By the time of King Dagobert I's death in 639, the Merovingians were no longer the powerful rulers they once were. The kingship had become largely ceremonial, with real power being exercised by the mayors of the palace, officials who were responsible for running the kingdom's day-to-day affairs. Initially, the mayors of the palace were essentially the royal governors of specific regions. Over time, however, they began to consolidate power and take on more responsibilities, effectively becoming the true rulers of the kingdom, while the Merovingian kings faded into the background. One such mayor, Charles Martel, would emerge as the central figure in the story of the Carolingians' rise to power. Charles Martel was a formidable military leader, known for his role in defeating the Muslim forces at the Battle of Tours in 732. This victory, while important in terms of halting the Muslim advance into Europe, was not the sole reason for his eventual rise. More importantly, Charles Martel understood the value of power, and he recognized that the Merovingian kings had become little more than figureheads. Though officially serving under the king, Charles was, in reality, the one who held the reins of power. As Charles Martel's influence grew, so did his ambitions. He began to consolidate his power, not just through military victories, but by forming alliances with key church figures. The Carolingians had long been close to the church, and Charles Martel was no exception. His relationship with the papacy was crucial in his efforts to legitimize his rise. He understood that, in the medieval world, support from the church was indispensable if one wanted to secure political legitimacy. While the Merovingian kings had relied on the church to maintain their divine right to rule, Charles Martel was crafting a new kind of power, one rooted in both military might and ecclesiastical approval. Despite his growing influence, Charles Martel never formally took the title of king. Instead, he continued to serve as mayor of the palace, a position that allowed him to hold real power while remaining nominally under the authority of the Merovingians. But as his power expanded, so did the pressure to formally legitimize his rule. The Merovingian king at the time, Chilperic II, was a weak and ineffective ruler. His reign was marked by internal divisions, and his inability to control the nobility or maintain stability in the kingdom made it clear that the Merovingian dynasty was no longer fit to rule. By the time Charles Martel died in 741, his son, Pepin the Short, was poised to take the next step in what could only be described as a political coup. Pepin's path to the throne was far from straightforward. While he had the military backing and the church's support, he still needed the formal approval of the Frankish nobility. As his father's successor, Pepin knew that the best way to secure his rule was to remove the Merovingians from the picture altogether. He took the unprecedented step of petitioning Pope Zachary, asking whether it was right for a man of such power as himself to serve as mayor of the palace while a weak king sat on the throne. The Pope's answer was clear: it is better that the one who holds the power should be king. With this endorsement, Pepin moved decisively. He gathered the support of the Frankish nobility and effectively deposed the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, who was then sent into a monastery. Pepin's rise to power marked the official end of the Merovingian dynasty and the beginning of the Carolingian era. While Pepin's actions were technically legal, given the Pope's support, the removal of the Merovingians could also be seen as a coup, a power grab by a man who had already consolidated much of the authority of the kingdom and was now seeking to formalize it. The fact that he deposed a king without any real bloodshed or resistance from the nobility raises questions about the legitimacy of the Merovingians' rule by the time Pepin took over. How much real power had the Merovingian kings held in the final years of their reign? Was their downfall simply a reflection of their ineffectiveness, or was there something more to it? The Carolingian takeover also had significant religious implications. By aligning himself with the Pope, Pepin not only secured his political position, but also legitimized the Carolingians as the new divine rulers of the Franks. The papacy's approval was invaluable, especially in a time when Christianity was the dominant force in European politics. The Church had already played a critical role in the rise of the Merovingians, and now, with the Pope's blessing, it was actively involved in replacing them. This relationship between the Carolingians and the Church would continue to be a defining feature of their reign, particularly during the rule of Charlemagne, Pepin's son. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Carolingian rise to power is the role of the Pope and the Church in what amounts to a political revolution. Was the papacy acting out of a genuine desire to see a stronger and more capable ruler on the throne, or was there a more Machiavellian calculation at play? Some historians have suggested that the Church was not simply supporting Pepin out of religious piety, but out of a desire to control the Frankish monarchy. The Pope, having endorsed Pepin's rule, now had a direct hand in shaping the future of the Frankish kingdom. In many ways, the Church's intervention in the Carolingian coup can be seen as part of a larger effort to influence the political landscape of Europe, positioning the papacy as the ultimate arbiter of power in the Christian world. Pepin's son, Charlemagne, would go on to become one of the most powerful and influential kings in European history, further solidifying the Carolingian dynasty's place in the annals of history. Charlemagne's reign, which saw the expansion of the Frankish Empire and the spread of Christianity, was, in many ways, the culmination of his father's coup. Under Charlemagne, the Carolingians became the undisputed rulers of Europe, their power secured by both military might and religious endorsement. However, the manner in which the Carolingians came to power raises important questions about the legitimacy of their rule. The overthrow of the Merovingians, whether by design or happenstance, set the stage for the Carolingians to dominate European politics for centuries. But in doing so, it also set a precedent for future power struggles, in which the will of the Church and the military elite would shape the course of history. In the end, the rise of the Carolingians was not merely a political transition. It was a revolution in the truest sense of the word. It was a power shift that forever altered the trajectory of European history, and the consequences of that shift are still felt today. The Merovingians were removed from the throne, not by popular rebellion or external invasion, but by a well-orchestrated political maneuver that leveraged both military strength and religious influence. The result was the creation of a new dynasty that would shape the destiny of Europe for centuries to come, one that continues to be the subject of fascination and speculation to this day. Even though the Merovingians were officially deposed, many historians and conspiracy theorists argue that the bloodline never truly vanished. In fact, some believe that the Merovingians managed to survive in secret, their descendants hidden from public view and their legacy buried beneath layers of revisionist history. This theory suggests that, rather than being completely eradicated, the Merovingian dynasty found a way to persist in the shadows of European power, influencing history from behind the scenes, all while maintaining a low profile to avoid detection. This idea raises an intriguing question. Could it be that the Merovingian bloodline has never disappeared, but has instead been carefully concealed, its existence guarded by those who have much to gain from keeping it hidden? The notion that the Merovingians secretly survived is not a new one. It has roots in some of the more obscure historical accounts and legends that speak of hidden royal families, secret societies, and a bloodline that refuses to fade into obscurity. The first clue that the Merovingians might have survived lies in the mysterious way their dynasty ended. Officially, the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, was deposed in 751 by Pepin the Short, who took the throne with the endorsement of the Pope. After his removal, Childeric was allegedly sent to a monastery, where he lived out his days in seclusion. However, this account raises more questions than answers. Why was Childeric, a king with royal blood, allowed to live out his life in relative comfort, rather than being executed or completely erased from history? Was his removal from power a way of ensuring that the Merovingian bloodline would remain, albeit out of sight? Many proponents of the theory that the Merovingian bloodline survived argue that the events surrounding Childeric's removal were part of a much larger plan to protect the lineage. Some believe that Childeric's deposition was a ruse, a way of quietly placing him and his descendants out of the public while allowing the Merovingian bloodline to continue in secret. Childeric's removal was not the end of the story, they argue, but merely the beginning of a covert operation to safeguard the legacy of the Merovingians. This theory suggests that the true heirs to the Merovingian throne were never eradicated. They were merely hidden, their identities concealed to protect them from political and religious forces that might have sought to eliminate them. Further supporting this theory is the fact that, after the fall of the Merovingians, there are several instances of mysterious figures and families claiming to have ties to the ancient dynasty. Some of these claims date back to the medieval period, when various noble families in France and beyond began to assert their descent from the Merovingians. The most famous of these claims is the so-called Priory of Chaon, a secret society that allegedly preserved the Merovingian bloodline and kept its existence hidden for centuries. According to some researchers, the Priory of Chaon was formed to protect the descendants of the Merovingians and to keep their royal lineage intact, even as the church and other political powers worked to suppress their true identity. The Priory, as the theory goes, became the custodian of the Merovingian legacy, ensuring that the bloodline would survive in secrecy until the time was right for it to be revealed. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence cited by those who believe the Merovingians survived in secret is the claim that the bloodline was preserved through marriage and strategic alliances with other royal families. It is well documented that, after the fall of the Merovingians, several noble families across Europe began to intermarry, creating a complex web of royal connections. Some of these families, particularly in France, are said to have secretly maintained ties to the Merovingians, even though these connections were not publicly acknowledged. The idea that the Merovingians survived through such alliances is not just speculative. There is a wealth of historical evidence showing that European royal families often intermarried to preserve their bloodlines and maintain political power. The theory that the Merovingians continued to exist in the shadows through such alliances is therefore not entirely without merit. In fact, there are some who believe that the Merovingian bloodline survival is linked to the legendary figures of the Knights Templar. The Templars, who rose to prominence in the 12th century, are often associated with the protection of sacred relics, including the Holy Grail. Some versions of the story suggest that the Templars were not only guarding the Grail, but also protecting the descendants of the Merovingian kings, ensuring that their bloodline remained intact. According to this theory, the Templars were aware of the true heritage of their founders, and they saw themselves as the protectors of this ancient bloodline, working in secret to keep it safe from the reach of the church and other political powers. The connection between the Merovingians and the Templars has been the subject of much speculation, with some suggesting that the Templars may have had access to hidden documents and genealogies that trace the lineage of the Merovingians through the centuries. In addition to the Templars, there are other secret societies that are thought to have preserved knowledge of the Merovingian bloodline. Freemasonry, in particular, has long been associated with the protection of esoteric knowledge, and some believe that the Freemasons have maintained secret knowledge of the Merovingians and their descendants. The connection between Freemasonry and the Merovingians is often cited in discussions about the role of secret societies in European history. Some theorists argue that Freemasonry was not just a group of builders, but also a covert organization dedicated to preserving the true history of Europe, including the hidden survival of the Merovingian dynasty. Another intriguing aspect of the survival theory is the role of certain religious and mystical traditions that may have helped to preserve the Merovingian bloodline. In the medieval period, many mystical orders, such as the Cathars and the alchemists, were believed to possess secret knowledge about the true nature of royal bloodlines. These groups often had their own esoteric traditions, which they believed could help them access hidden knowledge and power. Some researchers suggest that these mystical orders may have played a role in safeguarding the Merovingian legacy, passing down knowledge of the bloodline through secret teachings and rituals. One of the most curious aspects of the theory that the Merovingians survived in secret is the role of modern-day claimants to the throne. Over the centuries, there have been individuals and families who have claimed to be direct descendants of the Merovingian kings. These modern claimants often cite historical documents, genealogical records, and oral traditions that suggest they are part of the ancient bloodline. Whether or not these claims are true is a matter of much debate, but the fact that such claims continue to surface suggests that there may be some kernel of truth to the idea that the Merovingians did not vanish entirely. In some cases, these claimants have even been linked to prominent royal families in Europe, suggesting that the Merovingian bloodline may have blended into other aristocratic families over time. As we consider the possibility that the Merovingians survived in secret, it becomes clear that their legacy is not simply a matter of historical curiosity. It has real-world implications. The survival of this ancient bloodline could challenge many of the assumptions we have about European history, royal power, and the influence of the church. If the Merovingians did manage to survive in secret, then the question becomes, what role have they played in shaping the history of Europe since their official removal from the throne? Have their descendants had a hidden influence on the course of events, quietly guiding the destinies of nations without ever being publicly acknowledged? The idea that the Merovingian bloodline never truly disappeared raises profound questions about the nature of power, identity, and history itself. If the Merovingians survive, then what does that mean for our understanding of European royalty, the church, and the political structures that have shaped the modern world? The more we explore these questions, the more we realize that the story of the Merovingians is far from over. It is a tale that continues to unfold, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The connection between the Merovingian dynasty and the Holy Grail is one of the most enduring and provocative theories surrounding this enigmatic bloodline. For centuries, the legend of the Holy Grail has captivated the imagination of mystics, historians, and adventurers alike. Described in various texts as the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, the Grail is often seen as a symbol of divine power, eternal life, and sacred kingship. But what if the Grail is not just a religious artifact or myth, but a real, tangible object tied to the fate of the Merovingians? What if the Grail was, in fact, a key element of their reign, an object that not only symbolized their divine right to rule, but was also a literal possession of their royal bloodline? One of the most fascinating aspects of the Merovingian dynasty is their strong association with sacred kingship. Throughout their rule, the Merovingians were not simply secular rulers. They were seen as divinely appointed, their authority granted by God. This connection to the divine was one of the cornerstones of their legitimacy, and it may have been symbolized and reinforced by the Grail itself. According to some theories, the Merovingians' divine right to rule was not just a theological concept, but something far more tangible, a secret royal bloodline that was somehow tied to the Grail. Could the Merovingians have been the true custodians of the Grail, its keepers and protectors, tasked with safeguarding a powerful and mystical artifact that had the potential to alter the course of history? The idea that the Merovingians were connected to the Grail was popularized in the late 20th century, particularly through books like The Holy Blood and The Holy Grail and later, The Da Vinci Code. These works of speculative history suggest that the Merovingians were descendants of Jesus Christ, and that the Grail was not just a cup, but a symbol of Christ's bloodline. According to this theory, the Grail represents the continued existence of Jesus' family, and the Merovingians, as the direct heirs of this bloodline, were the rightful kings of Europe. The theory posits that the Grail was not merely an object of religious reverence, but a real, physical object passed down through the generations, its guardianship entrusted to the Merovingians. But how does this theory connect with the historical record? While there is no direct evidence to support the idea that the Merovingians were descendants of Jesus, there are several pieces of circumstantial evidence that suggest the Merovingians may have been linked to a secret bloodline, one that was carefully hidden by the church and other political forces throughout history. The most compelling of these pieces of evidence is the claim that the Merovingians were guardians of a sacred and powerful secret, one that could potentially threaten the very foundations of Christianity. The idea of a hidden bloodline is not entirely new. In fact, the concept of a divine or sacred bloodline has existed for centuries, appearing in various myths, legends, and religious traditions. From the ancient Egyptian pharaohs to the European kings and queens, the idea that certain families were descended from the gods has been a recurring theme in human history. In the case of the Merovingians, the notion that they were connected to Jesus' bloodline adds a new layer of intrigue to their already mysterious history. If the Merovingians were indeed descended from Jesus, this would mean that they were not just rulers of the Franks, but the rightful rulers of all of Christendom, a power that the Church would certainly not want to see challenged. According to some theorists, the connection between the Merovingians and the Grail is based on the idea that the Grail represents not just a physical artifact, but a symbol of divine royal blood. If the Merovingians were, as some suggest, the descendants of Jesus, then the Grail would be a symbol of their authority, their sacred right to rule. This connection would have given the Merovingians a unique and powerful position in medieval Europe, one that would have been seen as a direct challenge to the Church's authority. After all, if the Merovingians truly carried the bloodline of Christ, then they would be the legitimate heirs to the throne of Europe, not the papacy or the kings who ruled with the Church's blessing. This theory is complicated by the fact that the Church has consistently worked to suppress any claims to the contrary. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church exercised immense power over the spiritual and political life of Europe. For the Church, maintaining control over the narrative of Christianity was paramount. The idea that there was a rival bloodline, one that could challenge the Church's spiritual and political authority, was a threat that needed to be neutralized. As a result, the Church engaged in a concerted effort to erase any trace of the Merovingian dynasty and its alleged connection to the Grail. The most famous example of this suppression is the destruction of the Merovingian records. After the Carolingian takeover, many of the official records of the Merovingian kings were lost, erased, or deliberately destroyed. The Church, which had become the dominant institution in Europe by this time, worked to rewrite history, erasing the Merovingians from the narrative and ensuring that their connection to the Grail and a Christ bloodline would remain a mystery. Despite these efforts, the connection between the Merovingians and the Grail has persisted in various forms. The legends of the Grail and its custodians have continued to capture the imagination of people throughout history, and the Merovingian bloodline has remained a subject of fascination for many. In modern times, the theory that the Merovingians were the true heirs of the Grail has been popularized by works of fiction, such as the Da Vinci Code, which brought the idea to a global audience. While the book's depiction of history is fictionalized, it draws on many elements of the Merovingian mystery, suggesting that the Grail was a symbol of the sacred bloodline, and that the descendants of the Merovingians have hidden their true identity for centuries. The idea that the Merovingians were the true keepers of the Grail raises several important questions. What was the true nature of the Grail? Was it merely a cup, or was it something far more profound? Some theorists argue that the Grail is a symbol of divine knowledge, one that holds the key to understanding humanity's spiritual and historical origins. Others believe that the Grail represents a physical object with immense power, perhaps a relic that could change the course of history. Whatever the Grail's true nature, it is clear that it is inextricably linked to the idea of divine kingship, and that the Merovingians, as its guardians, were in a position of immense power. If the Merovingians were indeed the guardians of the Grail, then the question arises, what happened to the Grail? According to some theories, the Grail was hidden away, its location kept secret by the descendants of the Merovingians, and their protectors, such as the Knights Templar. The Templars, who were believed to have had access to secret knowledge and relics, are often associated with the Grail in modern myths and legends. Some suggest that the Templars were charged with protecting the Grail from those who would misuse its power, and that they hid the artifact in a secret location, perhaps in one of their strongholds or hidden within the vaults of their order. While the historical evidence for these claims is scant, the legends of the Grail and the Merovingians continue to intrigue. The idea that the Grail is not just a religious artifact, but a symbol of divine power and royal blood, ties together many of the most enduring mysteries of European history. The Merovingians, as the alleged descendants of Christ, may have been the true custodians of this sacred relic, and their legacy may be far more significant than we have been led to believe. As we examine the connection between the Merovingians and the Grail, we're forced to reconsider what we know about history, power, and religion. The Grail is more than just a myth. It is a symbol of something deeper, something hidden from view. And the Merovingians, as the alleged keepers of this secret, are at the center of a mystery that has yet to be fully understood. What secrets does the Grail hold? And what role do the Merovingians play in safeguarding its power? These are the questions that continue to haunt us as we attempt to piece together the hidden history of one of Europe's most fascinating dynasties. Among the most enigmatic and mysterious organizations to emerge in connection with the Merovingian bloodline is the Priory of Chaon. Often associated with the protection of sacred knowledge, secret histories, and ancient bloodlines, the Priory of Chaon has been the subject of both fascination and skepticism. Its name, shrouded in secrecy, is tied to some of the most popular theories about the hidden survival of the Merovingian dynasty, suggesting that this secretive society was not only aware of the ancient bloodline, but also tasked with safeguarding it through centuries of turmoil, suppression, and intrigue. But who were the members of the Priory of Chaon, and what role did they play in maintaining the legacy of the Merovingians? The story of the Priory of Chaon gained significant attention in the late 20th century, particularly through the best-selling novel The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. In the book, the Priory is portrayed as a secret society that has preserved the bloodline of Jesus Christ, hidden within the Merovingian family. According to Brown, the Priory's mission was to protect the secret of Christ's descendants, which was supposedly embodied in the Grail and the bloodline that it represented. However, while this popular portrayal captured the imagination of millions, the real history of the Priory of Chaon is far more complex, and the true nature of its connection to the Merovingians is the subject of much debate. The origins of the Priory of Chaon are murky and subject to varying interpretations. According to one version of the story, the priory was founded in the 11th century in Jerusalem by a group of monks and knights who were determined to protect the sacred bloodline of Christ. These individuals were said to have discovered a secret during the Crusades, an ancient truth about the Merovingians and their connection to the Holy Family. The priory's purpose, according to this theory, was to keep the bloodlines safe from the church, which was seen as a threat to its existence. The priory was believed to have formed alliances with key figures in Europe, including French kings and nobility, to ensure that the Merovingian legacy would continue in secrecy. However, much of the history of the priory, as it is known today, is a product of later claims and documents, many of which have been called into question. The most famous of these documents is the Dossier's Secrets, a collection of manuscripts discovered in 1967 in the French town of Rennes-le-Château. The Dossier's Secrets purportedly revealed the existence of the Priory of Chaon and its mission to protect the Merovingian bloodline. They contained a list of Grand Masters of the Priory, many of whom were said to be famous historical figures, including Leonardo da Vinci, Sir Isaac Newton, and Victor Hugo. The contents of these documents were soon published and circulated, sparking widespread interest in the priory and its supposed role in guarding the secrets of the Merovingian dynasty. Despite the allure of these documents, scholars and historians have raised significant doubts about their authenticity. Many believe that the Dossier's Secrets were part of an elaborate hoax, created in the mid-20th century to sell books and promote a particular narrative. The primary source for the modern story of the Priory of Chaon is Pierre Plantard, a Frenchman who claimed to be the Grand Master of the Priory in the 1950s and 1960s. Plantard's story, which centered on the idea that he was a direct descendant of the Merovingians, was largely based on fabricated genealogical records, and he was later revealed to have been involved in a number of fraudulent schemes. This raised questions about the veracity of his claims and the true nature of the Priory of Chaon. Yet, despite these revelations, the idea of a secret society dedicated to preserving the Merovingian bloodline has persisted. Some researchers argue that while the modern Priory of Chaon may have been a creation of Plantard and his associates, the concept of such an organization may have roots in genuine historical traditions. There are records of secret societies throughout medieval Europe, many of which were dedicated to preserving ancient knowledge, guarding sacred relics, and protecting royal bloodlines. It is not outside the realm of possibility that a group with similar aims could have existed, even if the details of its history are unclear. The connection between the Priory of Chaon and the Merovingians is rooted in the idea that the secret society was formed to protect and preserve the legacy of the Merovingian kings, particularly their claim to the sacred bloodline of Jesus. According to this theory, the Priory believed that the true royal bloodline of Christ's descendants was carried through the Merovingians, and that it was their duty to ensure that this bloodline would not be forgotten or lost to history. The Priory's members, who may have included prominent figures in European society, were allegedly entrusted with the task of guarding the secret of the Merovingians and, by extension, the Grail. The most compelling evidence for this theory comes from the symbolism associated with the Priory of Chaon. The Priory's emblem, a crescent moon and a star, is thought by some to be a reference to the sacred feminine and the lineage of Mary Magdalene. According to one interpretation, the symbol represents the marriage of the sacred feminine, Mary Magdalene, and the sacred masculine, Jesus, and the offspring of this union would be the direct ancestors of the Merovingians. The star and crescent are also associated with ancient pagan symbols, particularly those of the goddess, which some believe were incorporated into the Priory's iconography as a way of preserving the knowledge of the divine feminine and its connection to the royal bloodline. Another fascinating aspect of the Priory's alleged involvement with the Merovingian bloodline is the role of the Rennes-le-Château church. The village of Rennes-le-Château, located in the foothills of the French Pyrenees, has become a focal point for those interested in the hidden history of the Merovingians and the Priory of Chaon. According to some theories, the church in Rennes-le-Château contains hidden clues to the location of the Holy Grail or other important relics connected to the Merovingians. The village's history, steeped in mystery and intrigue, is said to be intimately connected with the activities of the Priory, with some claiming that the Priory used Rennes-le-Château as a base of operations for centuries. The mysteries surrounding Rennes-le-Château have fueled numerous theories about the connection between the Priory of Chaon and the Merovingians. Some suggest that the village was once a hiding place for Merovingian descendants or a location where important documents, such as genealogies or sacred texts, were kept. Others believe that the village contains clues that could lead to the discovery of the Grail itself, with the Priory's members working in secret to protect the artifact from falling into the wrong hands. Despite the ongoing mystery, the Priory of Chaon's role in guarding the Merovingian bloodline remains the subject of heated debate. Was it a real organization with deep historical roots, or was it the product of a modern conspiracy theory? While the documents and accounts surrounding the Priory may be dubious, the concept of a secret society dedicated to protecting a royal bloodline is not without precedent in history. Throughout Europe, secret societies have played significant roles in shaping political events, protecting sacred knowledge, and preserving royal legacies. The Priory of Chaon, whether real or imagined, taps into this rich tradition, and its connection to the Merovingians continues to captivate those who seek to uncover the hidden truths of history. What remains certain is that the story of the Priory of Chaon, its supposed guardianship of the Merovingian bloodline, and its involvement in the quest for the Grail is a mystery that refuses to fade. Its story, filled with intrigue, conspiracy, and hidden knowledge, continues to spark the imagination of those who believe that there is more to history than what is officially written. The Priory's secrets may never be fully revealed, but their connection to the Merovingians and the Holy Grail remains one of the most enduring and tantalizing mysteries of the past. The connection between the Merovingian bloodline and the Knights Templar is one of the most persistent and fascinating theories in the world of alternative history and conspiracy. For centuries, the Templars have been enveloped in myth and legend, largely due to their mysterious rise to power, their sudden and dramatic downfall, and the enigmatic symbols they left behind. But one of the most intriguing aspects of Templar history is their alleged connection to the Merovingian dynasty, an association that suggests the Templars may have played a crucial role in preserving and protecting the Merovingian bloodline, possibly even becoming its most dedicated custodians. But how much of this is true? Were the Templars simply opportunists seeking power and wealth, or were they genuinely entrusted with the protection of sacred lineage, one that had the potential to alter the very fabric of European history? The story of the Knights Templar begins in the early 12th century, when a group of knights established the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, or the Knights Templar. Originally founded to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, the Templars quickly rose to prominence, becoming one of the most powerful and wealthy military orders in medieval Europe. By the early 1300s, the Templars controlled vast estates across Europe, their wealth rivaling that of kings, and they had become deeply embedded in the political and religious structures of the time. What is often left out of the mainstream narrative, however, is the role that the Templars may have played in the preservation of ancient knowledge and royal bloodlines. According to certain theories, the Templars did not just seek military power or financial gain. They were also tasked with protecting sacred relics, ancient texts, and the secrets of Christendom. One of the most widely circulated theories is that the Templars were entrusted with safeguarding the Merovingian bloodline, which some believe to be the true descendants of Jesus Christ, a lineage that had been hidden from the public eye for centuries. The Templars' connection to the Merovingians is often linked to their alleged discovery of important religious artifacts during their time in the Holy Land. One of the most famous of these artifacts is the Holy Grail, the legendary cup that, according to Christian tradition, was used by Jesus at the Last Supper. According to some theories, the Templars didn't just seek the Grail for its symbolic significance, but because they believed it held the key to a hidden royal bloodline, the Merovingians, who were said to be the direct descendants of Christ. Some claim that the Templars knew that the Merovingians, far from being mere myth or legend, were alive and well, and that their bloodline continued to have political and spiritual significance. The idea that the Templars were protectors of the Merovingian legacy is built upon a variety of clues, both historical and symbolic. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence is the Templars' emblem, which some researchers believe holds secret meanings related to the Merovingian bloodline. The Templar seal, which depicts two knights riding on a single horse, is often interpreted as a symbol of duality, two men riding together, but representing two separate lineages or bloodlines. Some theorists suggest that these two men represent Jesus and Mary Magdalene, with the Templars acting as the protectors of their offspring, the Merovingians. The idea of duality also ties into the symbolism of the Grail itself, which is often depicted as a vessel of both masculine and feminine energy, representing the union of Christ and Magdalene, and by extension, their descendants. The Templars' alleged involvement with the Merovingians is also closely tied to the events surrounding their sudden downfall in the early 14th century. In 1307, the Templars were arrested by King Philip IV of France, who, heavily in debt to the order, sought to dismantle their power and seize their wealth. The Templars were charged with heresy, blasphemy, and a variety of other crimes, and many were tortured and executed. This dramatic and violent end to the order's existence has fueled speculation that the Templars were targeted because of their knowledge of the Merovingian bloodline. According to some theories, King Philip and the Catholic Church, fearing the Templars' power and influence, sought to destroy the order and erase any evidence of their connection to the sacred lineage. Yet, the Templars' fall from grace did not mark the end of their story. Many believe that, even after their official dissolution, the order continued to operate in secret, safeguarding the Merovingian bloodline and its associated relics. In fact, some suggest that the Templars were the true custodians of the Grail, hiding it away to protect it from those who would misuse its power. The Templars' secretive nature, their network of connections across Europe, and their symbols and rituals all point to the possibility that they were part of a larger effort to preserve hidden knowledge and royal legacies. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the Templar-Merovingian connection comes from the village of Rennes-le-Château in southern France, which has long been linked to the mystery of the Grail and the Templars. In the late 19th century, a priest named Bérenger Saunière discovered a series of cryptic clues in his parish church, which many believe point to the hidden location of the Grail or other sacred relics connected to the Merovingians. The church of Rennes-le-Château, with its strange symbols, hidden messages, and mysterious architectural features, has become a focal point for researchers exploring the Templar-Merovingian connection. Some believe that Saunière, a man of obscure background, was actually part of a larger network of Templar sympathizers who were working to uncover the hidden secrets of the past, including the true identity of the Merovingians and the location of the Grail. The Templars' presence in Rennes-le-Château and their alleged ties to the Merovingian bloodline are part of a larger web of mystery and intrigue that surrounds the village and the surrounding region. According to some theories, Rennes-le-Château was once a key stronghold for the Templars, and Saunière's discovery of cryptic clues was not merely a coincidence. The priest may have uncovered a hidden truth about the Merovingian dynasty, one that was deliberately suppressed by the Church and other powerful entities seeking to control European history. It is said that Saunière's discoveries and the mysterious wealth he gained from them were linked to a secret that the Templars had been guarding for centuries. One of the most enduring questions about the Templars and their connection to the Merovingians is whether the knights were simply opportunists, taking advantage of their power and influence to amass wealth and resources, or whether they were truly the protectors of a sacred lineage. While some scholars argue that the Templars were primarily motivated by greed and the pursuit of power, others contend that they were genuine custodians of a hidden legacy. The truth may lie somewhere in between, as the Templars were undoubtedly a complex and multifaceted organization, driven by a variety of motivations, both spiritual and material. The Templar-Merovingian connection, whether real or imagined, remains a powerful symbol of mystery, secrecy, and the pursuit of lost knowledge. The idea that a group of medieval knights could have been entrusted with the protection of a sacred royal bloodline, and that they played a role in safeguarding Europe's most important secrets, continues to captivate historians, researchers, and conspiracy theorists alike. The Templars' symbols, rituals, and legends, intertwined with the history of the Merovingians and the Grail, form a rich tapestry of mystery that has yet to be fully unraveled. As long as these questions remain unanswered, the Knights Templar and their connection to the Merovingian bloodline will continue to be a subject of fascination and speculation. The influence of the Merovingian dynasty and its supposed connection to secret bloodlines, the Grail, and hidden histories has left a profound mark on the world, one that extends far beyond the confines of written records. For centuries, their legacy has been encoded into the very fabric of European culture, from art and architecture to religious iconography and symbolism. Many of the most famous works of art and monuments across Europe are thought to contain hidden symbols and clues that point to the true nature of the Merovingian dynasty, its divine heritage, and its long-suppressed role in European history. These symbols, scattered across ancient churches, cathedrals, and royal palaces, often appear to be inconspicuous at first glance, but their deeper meanings have been deciphered by those who seek to uncover the hidden truths of history. One of the most striking examples of this hidden Merovingian legacy is found in the art and architecture of the churches and cathedrals built during and after the Merovingian period. These structures, which were often constructed under the patronage of royalty and religious elites, are rich with symbolism that reflects both the spiritual and political aspirations of the time. Among the most important symbols found in these buildings is the motif of the sacred king, which is often linked to the Merovingians and their claimed descent from Jesus Christ. In many medieval cathedrals, the figure of the sacred king is symbolized through various forms of religious iconography. This could include representations of Christ as the King of Kings, but also the depiction of royal figures and scenes of biblical history, suggesting their divine right to rule. One of the most famous examples of this is the Notre Dame de Chartres Cathedral in France, which contains numerous carvings and stained glass windows depicting royal figures with unmistakable Merovingian symbolism. The cathedral's labyrinth, for example, is believed by some researchers to be a representation of the spiritual journey of the sacred king, a journey that mirrors the hidden lineage of the Merovingians. The labyrinth, a common symbol of the mystical quest for truth, is often seen as a representation of the hidden knowledge that was passed down through the generations, from the Merovingians to those who would protect their legacy. In addition to the sacred king, another important symbol found in the art and architecture of this period is the divine feminine, a concept that has been closely associated with the Merovingians and their claimed connection to Mary Magdalene. The idea that Mary Magdalene was not only the wife of Jesus, but also the mother of his children has become a central theme in many of the theories surrounding the Merovingians. According to these theories, the Merovingians were the direct descendants of Christ and Magdalene, and their royal bloodline carried the power of the sacred feminine. This notion is reflected in the architecture of medieval churches, which often features symbols of the feminine, such as the rose, the moon, and the goddess. These symbols, sometimes hidden in plain sight, suggest that the divine feminine was not only an important spiritual concept, but also a political and dynastic force. One of the most famous and controversial symbols associated with the Merovingians and the divine feminine is the pentagram, or five-pointed star. The pentagram has long been considered a symbol of the goddess and the sacred feminine, representing the 5 points of human experience: birth, death, love, knowledge, and power. In many medieval churches and cathedrals, the pentagram can be found hidden in the architectural designs, particularly in the placement of windows, doors, and columns. Some researchers suggest that these pentagrams were placed deliberately to honor the divine feminine and to assert the hidden power of the Merovingian bloodline. The fact that the pentagram appears in Christian sacred spaces, where its association with the occult and paganism would be controversial, adds to the mystery surrounding these symbols. Beyond the confines of religious architecture, the Merovingian legacy can also be found in the art of the period, particularly in the works of famous artists such as Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci, often cited as a member of the secretive priory of Chaon, is thought to have embedded hidden symbols in his paintings that point to the true nature of the Merovingian bloodline. The most famous example of this is his painting The Last Supper, which has been a subject of intense scrutiny by researchers seeking to decode its hidden messages. Some theorists believe that the arrangement of figures in the painting, especially the position of Mary Magdalene, depict a symbolic reference to the union of the sacred masculine and feminine, the marriage of Jesus and Magdalene, and by extension, the Merovingian dynasty. The suggestion is that Da Vinci, as a member of the priory of Chaon, encoded this hidden knowledge into his work as a way of preserving the truth about the bloodline and its importance to European history. This hidden legacy is not limited to the work of Renaissance artists. Throughout European history, many artists and architects are believed to have encoded Merovingian symbolism into their works, often as a way of preserving knowledge that was otherwise suppressed by the Catholic Church. The role of art and architecture in transmitting esoteric knowledge was particularly important during times of religious and political upheaval, when the official narrative of history was controlled by powerful institutions like the Church. For example, many of the grand cathedrals and castles built in France and elsewhere during the medieval period are believed to contain hidden references to the Merovingians, as well as their connection to the Grail and the divine right to rule. A particularly fascinating example of this can be found in the architecture of the Château de Versailles, the grand palace of the French monarchy. The palace's design and layout have long been associated with symbolic references to the Merovingian bloodline, as well as to the divine right of kings. Some researchers believe that the alignment of the palace with certain celestial events, such as solstices and equinoxes, is intended to honor the hidden power of the Merovingians and their supposed connection to the sacred lineage of Christ. The very architecture of Versailles, with its labyrinthine gardens and carefully designed vistas, is thought to encode knowledge about the royal bloodline and its deep connection to the ancient mysteries of Europe. Beyond France, the Merovingian influence is said to extend to other parts of Europe, especially in regions with a rich history of royal and religious power. In England, for example, several cathedrals and castles are believed to contain hidden references to the Merovingian dynasty. The most famous of these is the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, which has been the subject of intense speculation for centuries. Rosslyn Chapel, with its intricate carvings, mysterious symbols, and hidden messages, is often cited as a key site in the story of the Merovingians and the Grail. The chapel's design is filled with symbols that seem to reference both the divine feminine and the royal bloodline, including carvings of the Tree of Life, the spiral, and the pentagram. Many researchers believe that the chapel was constructed as a monument to the hidden legacy of the Merovingians, and that its secrets continue to be guarded to this day. While much of the art and architecture associated with the Merovingians is veiled in mystery, the symbols and clues that have been preserved provide a tantalizing glimpse into a hidden history. These symbols are not merely decorative. They're the encoded messages of a secret tradition, one that has been passed down through the ages by those who have sought to preserve the true story of the Merovingians and their legacy. Whether found in the stained glass windows of a cathedral, the carvings on a palace wall, or the hidden symbolism in the paintings of a Renaissance master, these elements of art and architecture represent the enduring influence of the Merovingian dynasty, a dynasty whose true nature may have been concealed for centuries, but whose legacy continues to resonate in the very structures and symbols that define the history of Europe. The relationship between the Merovingians and the Catholic Church is one of the most contentious and mysterious aspects of their history. The Church, as the dominant institution in medieval Europe, held immense power, both spiritually and politically. It shaped the cultural and religious narratives of the time, and its influence extended into the very fabric of royal dynasties and noble families. For centuries, the Church maintained a close relationship with the ruling monarchs of Europe, including the Merovingian kings, who were seen as the divinely appointed rulers of the Frankish kingdom. However, as history unfolded, the connection between the Merovingians and the Church grew increasingly complex and, at times, antagonistic. The central question remains: was the Catholic Church complicit in the Merovingian dynasty's legacy, or did it work tirelessly to suppress it, ensuring that any traces of their bloodline and history were erased from the annals of time? At the heart of this question lies the issue of legitimacy. The Merovingians, as kings of the Franks, held a powerful and symbolic role in the early days of Christian Europe. They were often depicted as rulers who were anointed by God, their reigns sanctified by the Church. This divine right to rule was integral to the Merovingian claim to power, and it was this sacred legitimacy that helped them maintain their rule over the Frankish lands for several centuries. However, as the Carolingian dynasty, under the leadership of Charles Martel and Charlemagne, began to rise in prominence, a significant shift occurred in the political landscape of Europe. The Carolingians would ultimately eclipse the Merovingians, culminating in the coronation of Charlemagne as the Holy Roman Emperor in 800. With this change in power came a new relationship between the Church and the ruling monarchs, one that would not favor the Merovingians and would, in fact, seek to diminish their legacy. The rise of the Carolingians marked the beginning of the Merovingians' decline, but the circumstances surrounding their fall are still shrouded in mystery. One of the most prominent theories is that the Church, which had long supported the Merovingians' claim to the throne, began to turn against them as a result of political rivalry and the Church's desire to consolidate its own power. The Church, after all, was not just a religious institution, it was a political force with its own interests. As the Carolingians grew in power, the church saw an opportunity to realign itself with a new dynasty that would be more amenable to its influence. The Carolingians, with their firm relationship with the church, were eager to place themselves in a position of power over the Merovingians. In doing so, they would also ensure that the Merovingians were rendered politically irrelevant, their divine right to rule forgotten. One of the most famous actions taken by the church in this process of suppression was the formal deposition of the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, in 751. In this pivotal moment, Pope Zacharias is said to have authorized the removal of Childeric III from the throne, endorsing the ascension of Pepin the Short, the father of Charlemagne, to the kingship of the Franks. The removal of Childeric III from the throne effectively ended the Merovingian line, and the Carolingians began to position themselves as the new heirs to the Frankish kingdom, with the church's blessing. This act of deposition, which has been seen as an example of the church's growing power and its role in shaping the political landscape of Europe, is also a key moment in the historical narrative that seeks to explain the erasure of the Merovingian legacy. The question of whether the church sought to suppress the Merovingians entirely is complicated by the fact that the church had, at times, been complicit in their rise to power. The Merovingians, after all, had been crowned by bishops, and their legitimacy had been reinforced by the church's anointing. The idea of sacred kingship, which was a key component of the Merovingian rule, was deeply intertwined with Christian theology. The Merovingians were, in essence, the holy kings of Europe, their divine right to rule underscored by their connection to Christendom. This idea of sacred kingship, which was central to the Merovingian identity, was not something that the church could easily abandon, especially in the early years of the Middle Ages when the church itself was still consolidating its authority. Nevertheless, the rise of the Carolingians represented a challenge to this paradigm. The Carolingians, who were initially viewed as rivals to the Merovingians, managed to gain the support of the church by positioning themselves as defenders of the faith. Charlemagne's coronation as the Holy Roman Emperor in 800, with the blessing of Pope Leo III, solidified the Carolingian claim to legitimacy, and it also helped to establish the Carolingian dynasty as the preeminent political force in Europe. By contrast, the Merovingians were increasingly seen as weak, ineffective rulers, and their divine right to rule became a subject of contention. In this context, the church's role in the political shift becomes clearer. It was not simply a matter of the church opposing the Merovingians because of theological differences, but rather because of political necessity. The church had a vested interest in aligning itself with a powerful and capable ruler, and it saw the Carolingians as the best candidates to lead Christendom into a new era. The suppression of the Merovingian legacy, however, did not happen overnight. The Carolingians were careful to ensure that the memory of the Merovingians was not completely erased, but they did work to minimize their significance in the historical narrative. By the time of Charlemagne's reign, the Merovingians were largely forgotten by the wider public, their role in history reduced to a distant memory. This erasure of the Merovingians from the historical record was part of the broader effort to legitimize the Carolingian dynasty and to secure the church's position as the ultimate arbiter of political power in Europe. The church's role in this process was critical, as it controlled much of the narrative surrounding European history and was instrumental in shaping how royal lineages were viewed. Despite these efforts at suppression, the Merovingians did not disappear entirely from the historical imagination. In the centuries that followed, the memory of the Merovingians was preserved in various forms, particularly in the legends surrounding the Holy Grail and the secret bloodlines of Christ. The idea that the Merovingians were connected to the sacred lineage of Jesus Christ was not something that could easily be erased, especially as new generations of historians, researchers, and conspiracy theorists began to explore the hidden history of Europe. The legends of the Grail and the divine bloodline, which were intricately tied to the Merovingians, became part of the larger narrative that sought to uncover suppressed truths about Europe's past. In modern times, the role of the Catholic Church in the suppression or collaboration with the Merovingian dynasty has become a subject of intense speculation. While the Church has never officially acknowledged any connection between the Merovingians and Christ's bloodline, the ongoing fascination with these hidden histories has ensured that the story of the Merovingians, their divine right to rule, and their possible connection to the Grail continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world. The Church, for its part, has largely remained silent on the matter, offering no official explanations for the apparent erasure of the Merovingian dynasty from the historical record. In doing so, it has allowed the mystery to persist, leaving room for speculation and inquiry into one of history's most enduring conspiracies. Ultimately, the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Merovingians is a tale of power, politics, and religious legitimacy. The Church's role in shaping the historical narrative of Europe and its involvement in the suppression of the Merovingian dynasty reveal the complexities of medieval politics and the lengths to which powerful institutions will go to secure their position. The Merovingians, once the kings of Europe, became the subject of a hidden history, one that continues to intrigue and mystify those who seek to uncover the secrets that were buried centuries ago. Whether through deliberate suppression or unintended omission, the legacy of the Merovingians remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries in European history. While the Merovingians may have faded from the official historical narrative after their fall from power, the legacy of their bloodline has endured in various forms, often lurking in the shadows of European history. Whether hidden through centuries of political upheaval or deliberately suppressed by powerful institutions, the Merovingian dynasty's influence has been far from erased. In fact, many believe that the Merovingians, far from disappearing, have subtly influenced the course of history, surviving in the shadows and quietly shaping events from behind the scenes. This section explores the enduring legacy of the Merovingians, examining how their supposed descendants, their symbols, and their ideas have continued to resonate throughout history, often in ways that defy traditional historical accounts. The notion that the Merovingian dynasty has not entirely disappeared, but has rather continued to influence history in covert ways, is a central aspect of the conspiracy theories and alternative history narratives surrounding their bloodline. For centuries, the dynasty's connection to the divine right of kings, its sacred heritage, and its alleged ties to the Holy Grail have captured the imaginations of researchers and conspiracy theorists alike. It is often suggested that, while the public face of the Merovingians was erased, their legacy was maintained by secret societies, hidden royal families, and individuals who sought to preserve their bloodline and its associated powers. One of the most compelling aspects of this theory is the idea that the Merovingians were not only the rulers of France and Europe, but that their bloodline carried with it a mystical and spiritual significance. The idea that the Merovingians were the true descendants of Christ and Mary Magdalene, often referred to as the sacred bloodline, has played a key role in maintaining their legacy. According to this narrative, the Merovingian bloodline held a unique and powerful connection to the divine, one that was too valuable to be lost. Thus, even after the collapse of their reign in the 8th century, the supposed descendants of the Merovingians were thought to have continued their existence in the shadows, often concealed in the ranks of Europe's most powerful and influential families. Some researchers suggest that the bloodline was deliberately protected by secret societies like the Priory of Chaon, a group that purportedly sought to safeguard the Merovingian legacy from those who would seek to destroy it, such as the Catholic Church and the Carolingians. The Priory of Chaon, along with the Knights Templar and other secret organizations, is believed to have been entrusted with keeping the knowledge of the Merovingians alive, often in the form of esoteric teachings, hidden artifacts, and cryptic symbols. These groups are thought to have recognized the importance of preserving the Merovingian bloodline, not only for its potential political power, but also for the spiritual and mystical significance that the bloodline allegedly carried. While the Priory of Chaon and the Templars have been heavily romanticized and mythologized in popular culture, there is some evidence to suggest that secret societies throughout history have indeed played a significant role in preserving certain hidden truths, including the legacy of royal bloodlines. The idea that the Merovingian legacy was maintained in secret through clandestine means is not without precedent. Throughout Europe's history, royal families and elites have often guarded their genealogies and claimed divine legitimacy, and it is conceivable that the Merovingian bloodline, with its alleged connections to Christ and the Grail, could have been preserved in a similar manner. The idea of the Merovingian legacy surviving in the shadows is not limited to secret societies. Some suggest that the Merovingian bloodline has continued to influence European politics, particularly through the royal families of Europe. According to these theories, the true heirs of the Merovingians have not disappeared, but instead have integrated themselves into the nobility of France, England, and other European nations. Some even claim that certain royal families, including the British royal family, are connected to the Merovingians through distant, hidden branches of their family trees. While there is little concrete evidence to support this claim, the idea that royal bloodlines are interwoven and that many European dynasties are interconnected through centuries of marriage alliances is well documented in history. The enduring fascination with the Merovingian legacy can also be seen in the way their symbols and iconography have resurfaced in popular culture. The Merovingians are often associated with the idea of the sacred king, a ruler whose divine right to govern is linked to a hidden or esoteric knowledge. This concept has influenced a wide range of literary works, films, and television shows, from the Holy Grail legends to modern conspiracy thrillers. The recurring theme of a hidden bloodline, protected by secret societies and linked to ancient knowledge, is a direct reflection of the Merovingian narrative. Whether in the form of books like the Da Vinci Code or the vast number of films and documentaries exploring the Grail and the hidden history of Christianity, the Merovingians remain a symbol of mystery, power, and suppressed history. This symbolic legacy is also tied to the resurgence of interest in the so-called Grail myths. The Holy Grail, often associated with Christ's bloodline, has been a key part of the Merovingian story. According to many alternative historians, the Grail is not a physical cup, but rather a symbol of the sacred bloodline that was said to have been carried by the Merovingians. This idea, popularized by the aforementioned Da Vinci Code and other works, suggests that the true Grail is not an artifact, but the preservation of Christ's descendants through the Merovingian line. In this context, the Grail represents not just a religious relic, but a source of power, one that has been hidden and protected for centuries. The pursuit of the Grail, therefore, becomes a quest to reclaim the lost legacy of the Merovingians and restore their rightful place in history. In addition to their spiritual and political influence, the Merovingians have been linked to a variety of legendary treasures and mystical artifacts. The most famous of these is the treasure of Rennes-le-Château, a small village in southern France that has become synonymous with the Merovingian legacy. According to some theories, the treasure hidden in Rennes-le-Château contains not just material wealth, but also sacred knowledge, perhaps even clues to the location of the Grail or other important relics tied to the Merovingians. The legend of Rennes-le-Château, which gained widespread attention in the 20th century, is just one example of how the Merovingian legacy has persisted through time, remaining a source of intrigue for historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike. Despite the overwhelming lack of concrete evidence, the Merovingian legacy continues to resonate with those who believe that there is more to history than what is officially recorded. The persistent belief in the survival of their bloodline, hidden in plain sight, speaks to a larger desire to uncover suppressed histories and hidden truths. The idea that powerful families and secret societies have conspired to conceal the true story of the Merovingians is a captivating one, as it suggests that the official narrative of history is incomplete and that powerful forces have worked for centuries to shape and control what we know. In the end, the Merovingians, whether as a historical reality or a mythical construct, represent a fascinating chapter of European history that refuses to be forgotten. Their legacy, like that of many ancient royal dynasties, is one that has been preserved in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond the surface. Whether their descendants continue to wield influence behind the scenes, or whether their story has been entirely obscured by time, The Merovingians will continue to captivate the imagination of those who seek to unlock the mysteries of the past and understand the hidden forces that have shaped the world we live in today. Rennes-le-Château, a small, picturesque village nestled in the foothills of the French Pyrenees, has long been the focal point of one of the most enduring and tantalizing mysteries in the world of alternative history. Its fame was brought to the forefront in the 19th century, largely due to the strange discoveries and enigmatic actions of Berenger Saunière, a local priest who, in the late 1800s, seemingly stumbled upon cryptic clues and symbols in his parish church that pointed to a hidden treasure, a treasure that many believe is tied to the Merovingian bloodline and the Holy Grail. But what exactly did Saunière uncover in the seemingly sleepy village of Rennes-le-Château? And how do these mysterious findings relate to the long-lost legacy of the Merovingian dynasty and their supposed connection to the Knights Templar? To understand the significance of Rennes-le-Château in the context of the Merovingian legacy, one must first examine the strange and curious life of Berenger Saunière. In 1885, Saunière, a young and relatively obscure priest, became the parish priest of Rennes-le-Château. At the time, the village was not much different from countless other rural communities in France, quiet, unassuming, and steeped in local traditions. However, Saunière's tenure as priest would soon take a very strange turn. It is said that Saunière, during renovations to the local church, made a series of startling discoveries. These included hidden parchments, strange inscriptions, and other oddities that seemed to suggest a deeper, more occult history hidden beneath the surface of the church. The most famous of these discoveries was an inscription found on a pillar in the church, which was said to contain cryptic symbols suggesting a secret code that, when deciphered, pointed to a hidden treasure. But what treasure was Saunière referring to? According to some theories, the treasure Saunière uncovered was not just material wealth, but something far more significant, a hidden legacy tied to the Merovingian bloodline. The idea is that Rennes-le-Château was not simply a village of religious significance, but a sanctuary, a place that had been home to some of the most sacred secrets in European history. These secrets, it is believed, were connected to the Merovingians, whose claim to divine blood and the Holy Grail had been suppressed by the Church and other political powers. The idea that Rennes-le-Château is a repository of Merovingian secrets is built upon the belief that the Merovingians, being the supposed descendants of Christ and Mary Magdalene, had access to knowledge and relics that were too powerful to be left in the hands of the Church or the ruling dynasties of the time. Saunière's strange discoveries, combined with his sudden and inexplicable wealth after the renovations, have only deepened the mystery surrounding Rennes-le-Château. According to some researchers, Saunière's newfound riches were the result of his uncovering something far more valuable than mere gold or silver. He had found clues to the lost Merovingian treasure, or perhaps even the Grail itself. This theory is further supported by the fact that Saunière's renovations to the church seem to include many elements of esoteric symbolism, some of which appear to allude to the divine feminine, the sacred bloodline, and the hidden history of the Merovingians. Among the most famous of these symbols is the mysterious Devil's Column, a pillar in the church that is believed to encode a hidden message or cipher related to the Grail or the Merovingian dynasty. The Devil's Column is just one example of the many strange symbols and features that can be found in and around the church. The church itself is riddled with signs of occult knowledge. Everything from references to ancient pagan traditions to symbols associated with secret societies like the Freemasons and the Templars. The presence of such symbols has led many researchers to speculate that Rennes-le-Château was once a Templar stronghold or a place where the Templars secretly protected sacred knowledge. According to some theories, the Templars may have hidden important documents and relics in the village, including the secret of the Merovingian bloodline and the true story of the Grail. This theory suggests that the Templars were not only warriors of Christendom, but also guardians of ancient, esoteric knowledge. As the protectors of the Grail and the sacred bloodline, the Templars may have established Rennes-le-Château as a base of operations for safeguarding these secrets. The idea that the Templars were connected to Rennes-le-Château is reinforced by the fact that the Templar order, after their dissolution in the early 14th century, is believed by some to have gone underground, continuing to operate in secrecy. The theory of Rennes-le-Château as a Templar sanctuary is compelling because it offers a link between the Merovingians, the Grail, and the Templars, three of the most enduring and enigmatic subjects in alternative history. Adding another layer of mystery to the Rennes-le-Château enigma is the village's connection to other ancient traditions and religions. Some researchers believe that the village's location is significant in terms of its alignment with ancient sacred sites, such as the Phoenician and Roman settlements in the region. The area around Rennes-le-Château is known for its pre-Christian history, and some theorists suggest that the Merovingians, as heirs to ancient pagan traditions, may have chosen this location specifically because of its deep spiritual resonance. The connection between Rennes-le-Château and pre-Christian religious practices points to a much older tradition that the Merovingians may have been protecting, a tradition that was not only Christian in nature, but also intertwined with older, more mystical belief systems. There is also the theory that the village of Rennes-le-Château is located on an ancient ley line, a concept that suggests that the Earth's natural energy flows along certain lines or points, which have been marked by ancient civilizations. Ley lines are thought to carry powerful energy, and many believe that places of spiritual significance, such as Rennes-le-Château, were intentionally located on these lines to harness this energy. The idea that Rennes-le-Château sits on a ley line ties into the broader narrative that the Merovingians were not just political rulers, but also stewards of ancient knowledge that transcended conventional religious boundaries. This knowledge, it is believed, was passed down through the ages, often in secret, and its true significance was hidden from the public. The cryptic messages and hidden codes found at Rennes-le-Château have led to numerous theories and speculations about the true nature of the treasure Saunière discovered. Some believe that the treasure is a physical hoard of gold or other valuables, while others argue that it is a repository of lost knowledge, including religious texts, maps, and artifacts that point to the truth about the Merovingian bloodline and its connection to the Holy Grail. Whether or not Saunière actually discovered the Grail, or merely stumbled upon clues that pointed to it, is a subject of intense debate. What is clear, however, is that his discovery, however it may have happened, set off a chain of events that brought the village of Rennes-le-Château to the attention of the world. The mystery surrounding Rennes-le-Château has continued to captivate the imaginations of treasure hunters, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike. Despite the many theories and investigations into the village's secrets, no conclusive evidence has ever emerged to explain what Saunière discovered or to confirm the theories about Rennes-le-Château's connection to the Merovingians and the Grail. Nevertheless, the village remains a symbol of the hidden history of Europe, and its mysteries continue to fascinate those who seek to uncover the truth. Whether Rennes-le-Château was truly a Templar stronghold or a sanctuary for the Merovingian legacy, it remains a key piece of the puzzle in the ongoing search for lost knowledge. The village is a place where history, myth, and esoteric symbolism converge, offering a glimpse into the ancient mysteries that have been preserved for centuries. Whether or not Saunière found the treasure he sought, or simply uncovered clues to a much deeper mystery, the legacy of Rennes-le-Château endures, a testament to the enduring fascination with the hidden history of the Merovingians and their connection to the sacred bloodline. The notion of hidden bloodlines, particularly those linked to ancient royal families, is a recurring theme in alternative history, with the Merovingians often seen as a key example of a lineage that continues to influence the world from the shadows. While the official history of the Merovingian dynasty ended over a millennium ago, many conspiracy theories and alternative history narratives argue that their descendants, or those who claim to be their heirs, still exert influence in modern politics, economics, and society. The idea that the Merovingian bloodline may have survived through secret societies, clandestine royal connections, or even intermarriages with powerful European families is not just an academic curiosity, but also a political theory that suggests a hidden hand in shaping world events. This section delves into these theories, exploring the ways in which the Merovingians, or those believed to be their descendants, have allegedly shaped the course of history and may continue to do so in the modern era. The first step in understanding the modern political influence of the Merovingians is to examine the historical context in which their bloodline came to power. As the first kings of the Franks, the Merovingians were originally revered as a divine lineage with an unquestionable right to rule. Their reign, which spanned several centuries, was built on the belief that they were not only the political leaders of Europe, but also the protectors of a sacred bloodline connected to Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. The centrality of this divine kingship in Merovingian rule suggests that, even after their political downfall in the 8th century, the idea of their sacred bloodline remained potent and influential. Over the centuries, various royal families and power brokers across Europe may have recognized the significance of this bloodline and its potential political capital, even if they chose not to openly acknowledge it. One of the most intriguing aspects of this theory is the belief that the Merovingian descendants, whether by direct lineage or through secretive connections, are woven into the very fabric of Europe's aristocracy and political elite. Some researchers claim that various royal families, such as those of France, Britain, and Spain, maintain hidden connections to the Merovingians, though these ties are often obscured by centuries of intermarriage and shifting alliances. According to this view, many of the most influential monarchs of Europe, such as the Bourbons of France, the Habsburgs of Austria, and the British royal family, may share a distant but significant ancestral link to the ancient Merovingian kings. Though these connections may not be publicly acknowledged, the idea is that the Merovingians, as the holders of a sacred lineage, continue to hold symbolic power that reverberates through the centuries. These theories are often based on the notion that the Merovingian bloodline was not merely royal but also sacred, imbued with a unique divine right to rule. If this bloodline were preserved, then its descendants would theoretically be the rightful rulers of Europe, regardless of political boundaries or the rise of new dynasties. This notion of a rightful ruler, passed down through generations, lends itself to a broader conspiracy theory in which the Merovingian legacy continues to influence global politics today. Some even speculate that certain royal families or political elites still view themselves as part of this true royal line, holding on to the Merovingian heritage as a symbol of power and divine legitimacy. The claim that modern elites maintain ties to the Merovingian bloodline is particularly intriguing when viewed through the lens of secret societies, which many believe continue to exert influence over global affairs. For centuries, organizations like the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and the Priory of Chaon have been the subject of speculation, with many asserting that these groups serve as guardians of esoteric knowledge and secret royal lineages. According to some conspiracy theorists, these organizations, many of which trace their origins to medieval times, are not merely benign fraternal orders, but rather covert institutions that protect and promote the interests of specific bloodlines, including the Merovingians. The Priory of Chaon, in particular, has been linked to the Merovingian dynasty in various alternative history narratives. Founded in the Middle Ages, the Priory of Chaon is said to have served as the custodian of the Merovingian bloodline, working behind the scenes to ensure that its influence continued to be felt, even if it was no longer publicly recognized. The theory suggests that the priory was responsible for preserving the knowledge of the Merovingians and ensuring that the descendants of this sacred bloodline were placed in key positions of power. Some theorists claim that the priory's influence extends to modern political and royal families, with individuals from these families secretly aligned with the ancient Merovingian legacy. The connections between the Merovingians and modern elites are not limited to secret societies. There are also claims that some modern political events and shifts in power were influenced by individuals or groups who consider themselves the heirs to the Merovingian dynasty. For example, the rise of certain powerful European families in the 19th and 20th centuries has been attributed to their supposed links to the Merovingian bloodline. Some suggest that these families, using their hidden royal status as leverage, have manipulated political systems to preserve their power. According to this theory, the wealth and influence of families like the Rothschilds, who were heavily involved in European banking, are seen as evidence of a broader, coordinated effort to maintain control over global financial systems. This theory extends to the notion of hidden monarchies that operate behind the scenes of the modern political system. While most countries today are governed by elected officials, the theory posits that there are still shadow monarchies in play where the true rulers, descendants of the Merovingians and other ancient bloodlines, exert control through covert means. These modern-day monarchs are said to influence political decisions, economic policies, and international relations, all while remaining out of the public eye. This hidden influence is sometimes described as a form of soft power, where the true rulers do not need to be visible in the traditional sense, but can still wield immense power by controlling key economic, political, and social institutions. The concept of hidden monarchies also ties into the idea of global governance, which is a recurring theme in various conspiracy theories. Some believe that a secret cabal of powerful families, including those with Merovingian ties, is working behind the scenes to create a unified global government that would centralize power and reduce the influence of individual nation-states. This theory suggests that the Merovingians, as the alleged rightful heirs to the throne of Europe, would be positioned as the leaders of this global movement. Their influence spread across continents through a network of political, financial, and social elites. One of the more outlandish yet persistent claims about the Merovingian bloodline's influence on modern politics is the assertion that certain world leaders are direct descendants of the dynasty. This idea often surfaces in discussions about modern-day politicians or royal figures, especially those who have risen to power unexpectedly or in unusual circumstances. These claims are rarely substantiated by concrete evidence, but they continue to captivate those who believe that the Merovingians, though long faded from the official history books, continue to pull the strings of world politics. The idea that the Merovingians have a hidden hand in world events also feeds into a broader narrative of secret knowledge and esoteric wisdom. The supposed heirs of the Merovingians are often depicted as being in possession of ancient knowledge that, if revealed to the public, could alter the course of history. This knowledge, which some believe is connected to the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or other lost artifacts, is said to hold the key to unlocking untapped potential in human consciousness or society. In this view, the Merovingian bloodline is not merely a symbol of royal legitimacy, but is also the guardian of a deeper, mystical truth that has been kept hidden for millennia. While there is no definitive proof that the Merovingians, or their supposed descendants, are actively influencing modern politics, the idea that their legacy endures in secret circles remains a compelling aspect of alternative history. From royal bloodlines to secret societies, the theory of a hidden Merovingian presence in contemporary political life suggests that history is far more complex and mysterious than official narratives would have us believe. Whether through the manipulation of political power, the control of financial systems, or the preservation of esoteric knowledge, the Merovingians are said to continue to play a role in the shaping of world events, quietly, subtly, and from behind the scenes. The legend of the Holy Grail is one of the most captivating and enduring myths in Western history. It has been the subject of countless books, films, and scholarly works, each trying to unravel its mysteries and decipher its meaning. For many, the Grail is a symbol of divine wisdom, purity, and ultimate power. But what if the Grail is not just a mystical cup or a religious artifact, but a symbol of something far more profound, a hidden bloodline, one that reaches back to the very origins of Christianity itself? Among the many theories surrounding the Grail, one of the most tantalizing is the idea that it is linked to the Merovingian dynasty, whose royal bloodline is said to descend directly from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. This theory, which has captured the imagination of conspiracy theorists, esoteric scholars, and alternative historians alike, suggests that the Merovingians were not merely rulers of the Franks, but were the true keepers of the Grail, protectors of a sacred lineage that has been deliberately concealed from history. To understand this connection between the Merovingians and the Grail, we must first delve into the mythological roots of the Grail itself. In medieval literature, the Holy Grail is often described as the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper, a vessel that, according to Christian tradition, was used to collect Jesus' blood during the crucifixion. Over time, the Grail became imbued with magical and mystical properties, and the legends surrounding it grew increasingly complex. In the most popular versions of the story, the Grail is a symbol of divine grace and purity, with the power to heal, grant immortality, and bring salvation to those worthy of its possession. The quest for the Grail is portrayed as the ultimate spiritual journey, a journey that can only be completed by a knight or seeker of exceptional virtue, courage, and faith. However, there is another, far less conventional interpretation of the Grail myth. This theory, which has gained traction in recent decades, suggests that the Grail is not a physical object at all, but rather a symbol of a secret bloodline, one that has been passed down through the generations, hidden from the public eye. In this interpretation, the Grail represents the bloodline of Christ, which was allegedly preserved by Mary Magdalene and passed down to her descendants. According to some alternative history narratives, the Merovingians were the rightful heirs to this bloodline and were thus the true keepers of the Grail. These theories argue that the Merovingians, far from being just a dynasty of Frankish kings, were part of a larger, more mystical tradition, one that connected them to the very origins of Christianity itself. The theory that the Merovingians are connected to the Holy Grail is rooted in several key ideas. First, it is suggested that Mary Magdalene, often depicted in the Gospels as a close companion to Jesus, was not just a follower of Christ, but his wife, and possibly the mother of his children. This theory is based on the idea that the early Christian church, particularly in its formative years, sought to suppress certain aspects of its history. Specifically, the idea that Jesus had a family and that his bloodline continued after his death.